Hi, welcome to another episode of Wild Child Wellness, the video series where I talk about natural remedies for common childhood symptoms and when to seek medical attention. Just to let you know, this video is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice from a trusted medical provider. So you want to get yourself one of those. I'm Julie DeVono, 30 years as a pediatric nurse and nurse practitioner, specializing in homeopathy and natural remedies in conjunction with mainstream medicine, as well as parenting and developmental advice for kids. So today is March 1st, and it is the beginning of spring. As we start looking towards spring, the illnesses that we need to look out for change. For example, I always say that cold and flu season is between Halloween and Easter. So the Easter Bunny's coming. And the good news about that is it means that cold and flu season should be not necessarily going away completely. I mean, it never really does, but becoming less of a concern. The bad news is the Easter Bunny brings strep throat in his basket with those eggs. We in the medical field know that spring is strep throat season. It becomes the diagnosis of the week. We see tons of it this time of year. We're not quite sure exactly why. I mean, I'm sure somebody out there knows why, but it's just different illnesses have their sweet spot as far as time of year. And right at the end of the crack of cold weather, in the beginning of spring, we get slammed with a lot of strep throat. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. What the symptoms are, what to look for, and what you can do to prevent it, and some natural remedies to help soothe the symptoms and maybe even stave it off. So now part of the problem with strep throat is it's the same time of year that allergy symptoms get really bad. And just like I talked about in a previous video, sometimes it's difficult to tell when you've got allergies, whether or not your symptoms are from the allergies or from an illness. Now, the thing with kids is kids can have more than one thing going on. I'll joke and say, kids can have peanut butter and jelly. Kids can have allergies and strep throat. So sometimes it gets a little difficult to tease out what you're dealing with, but I'm going to give you some pointers on that as well. For example, like I alluded to in a previous video about allergies as it relates to cough, allergies, you have wet, drippy symptoms. You don't have any fever because allergies are not an infection. So if you're dealing with runny nose, congestion, cough, and a sore throat from that drippy, runny nose, then you're probably dealing with allergies. And I'll talk about treatments for that in more detail in another video. Today, I want to focus on strep throat. Now, if you have symptoms that are more hot and dry, I talked about previously, bacterial infections tend to be more hot and dry, while viruses tend to be more wet and drippy. So if you're dealing with fever, and with strep, it's usually a low to moderate fever. You don't usually get a fever above 102.5 when you're dealing with strep. You can occasionally, but most of the time it's a low to moderate fever. And of course, you have the sore throat. You also have a headache and stomach ache, often nausea and vomiting. And if you've got that going on, you've got what I call the strep quadfecta. I don't know if quadfecta is a real word, but you know what? I'm going to own it. I'm going to make it a word. So quadfecta means those four classic symptoms: fever, headache, stomach ache with some nausea and vomiting, and of course, the sore throat. Now, the interesting thing about the stomach symptoms is you don't get diarrhea. In fact, if you get diarrhea, and this is going to sound gross, but being a more wet and drippy symptom, then that's usually more of a stomach virus. The kind of stomach symptoms you get with strep throat are just stomach ache and nausea and sometimes vomiting. And in fact, with kids, they often don't present with a sore throat. But if they have what I call a dry stomach ache, like no diarrhea, they've got just a stomach ache, nausea, and vomiting with a fever, strep is going to be on my radar, especially if they have the swollen lymph nodes. And that is a huge red flag for strep throat. And the way that you can assess for that is you want to take your two or three fingers and put them right on your neck, below your chin line, under your ear, and very gently, sometimes even moving them in circles while you bring your fingers forward. When you get to the side here, that's where the lymph nodes are. Now, with some kids, especially if you have a lean kid or a skinny person, you'll feel little lymph nodes all the time. But when you have strep throat, the lymph nodes are pretty prominent, and they're large, they're easy to feel. Now, you can also just get in the habit of feeling your kids' lymph nodes when they're healthy while you're trying to learn this technique. And if you know how it feels when they're normal and healthy, you'll feel the difference. It'll be markedly noticeable when they have a sore throat and a fever and those other symptoms. You're like, okay, you've got some swollen lymph nodes. We may be dealing with strep throat. You might hear my cat sneezing in the background. I guess he's got allergies too. Now, what's interesting about the swollen lymph nodes is I've never seen a kid with strep throat that did not have swollen lymph nodes. And I've seen kids that really didn't have much else in the way of symptoms. Maybe they're there for a well visit, but when I do my basic exam, I notice these really swollen, prominent lymph nodes. And especially if the mom says, oh, their energy's been a little low, they're not themselves, I'll do a strep test. So you always have swollen lymph nodes when you have strep throat. You can have swollen lymph nodes and have something else like a virus or mono, but you always have it with strep throat. So that's why it's a big red flag to me. And that's why if you feel that and you're having those symptoms, you should do a strep test. Now, the reason why strep throat is something that if you suspect it, you really do need to get tested and treated, because strep throat can be very serious if it's untreated. We used to refer to it, you maybe have heard the phrase scarlet fever, and it kind of reminds us of an olden day illness like Haiti or Little Women, something back in the olden days. But that's because since we've invented antibiotics, strep throat has become a less serious, less lethal condition. But back before antibiotics, scarlet fever was very serious. The reason, and you can still get scarlet fever, but you do need to get treated at that point. And the reason we call it scarlet fever is because you'll have a rash on the torso, so on the chest and on the back. It's a little red, and you feel it. It's a sandpaper rash. And what that means is you'll see the redness, but you don't really see the rash. But when you rub your hand across it, you'll feel it, and it feels like sandpaper. Now, that's a sign that the strep throat has progressed beyond the tonsils, which is where strep throat likes to hide and where it nestles in. But if you have strep throat long enough, or if it's a serious enough case that's moving very fast, then it can get into the bloodstream. And once the strep gets in the bloodstream, then it causes this rash. That's when you're dealing with scarlet fever. At that point, still very easy to treat, very necessary to treat. If strep throat isn't treated properly, it can cause some serious secondary problems. For example, it can cause rheumatic fever, which is a heart condition, very serious. It can also cause it can settle in the joints and cause arthritic-like symptoms and conditions. It can settle in the kidneys and cause something called Berger's nephritis. And it can even trigger a neurological condition called PANDAS. You may have heard of PANDAS, and it's when, if a child gets strep throat, they get these neurological symptoms like obsessive compulsive ODD or OCD type symptoms, or they get an abnormally high level of anxiety for their typical personality. They can even get tics, which is those like repetitive involuntary motions. Now, PANDAS stands for, and I had to look this up, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Strep Infections. So, but everybody just calls it PANDAS. And most of the time, when you treat the underlying strep infection, those symptoms go away. But it can become something that's chronic and persistent. So just another reason why strep needs to be taken very seriously. Of course, you have those symptoms. You go and you get a strep test, a rapid test. You get your results in 5 minutes and you start treatment. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is over the last 30 years, we didn't have, when I first started, we didn't have rapid strep tests. We would send a throat culture out and you get the results in like two to 3 days. and then we would start treatment. And, so I do recommend to people nowadays, you don't want to rush out to get a strep test as soon as you have a sore throat. First of all, the rapid strep test really isn't accurate and dependable unless you've had symptoms for at least 24 to 48 hours. So you could go too early, get a strep test too early, and have a false negative. So it's better to wait at least 24 hours before getting the strep test, so it's more accurate. And another reason I think is, before we had rapid strep tests, the patient, they would have to sit with those symptoms and sit with that infection for a day or two while we were waiting for the throat culture to come back. Strep was less common and it was less serious. It didn't seem to hit so hard and fast. Nowadays, strep throat seems to be a lot more common, and it also seems to be a lot stronger of an infection. It makes people sicker much more quickly and makes them very sick. And, my own personal theory on this is that those 1 or 2 days that people used to have to sit with the infection gave their body an opportunity to build resistance against it and maybe build antibodies against it and help protect them from getting strep so easily in the future. So that's another reason why I recommend waiting a day or two before going to get the strep test so that the strep test will be more accurate and you might be able to allow your body a chance to build some natural resistance against strep so they don't get it so easily and so quickly the next time they're exposed to it. So that's helpful. Now, of course, what are you going to do while you're waiting for that, for the 1 or 2 days? There are some things you can do to try to mitigate the strep, try to prevent it from settling in, and also to help soothe the symptoms so that you're more comfortable while you're waiting for that. And of course, I have some recommendations for that. My first go-to for strep throat is colloidal silver. And colloidal silver is a natural remedy that you can get at most natural remedies stores, health food stores, places like that. You want to make sure you get food grade. It may also be labeled preservative-free colloidal silver, because what you're going to be doing with this colloidal silver is it'll come in a bottle, a spray bottle, or you can pour it into a spray bottle, but you're going to want to spray the back of your throat 1 or 2 sprays 3 times a day. But because, of course, you'll be ingesting that, you want to make sure it's food grade and preservative free so it doesn't make you sick. That would defeat the purpose. So you get your colloidal silver at the first sign of strep. You spray your throat a couple times a day, and it may actually help your body fight off the strep before it settles in. And you can also use that during strep season, like this time of year, as a preventative. So you can put it in the bathroom next to your toothbrush, and in the morning after brushing your teeth, do a spray of the colloidal silver in your throat, and that will sit on your tonsils so that if you're exposed to strep, the colloidal silver will kill the strep bacteria before it can make you sick. Colloidal silver is a phenomenal natural antimicrobial, and that means it kills infections. It kills viruses, it kills bacteria, it kills fungus. It's particularly good at killing bacteria. I actually refer to it sometimes as first aid kit in a bottle because you can use it to spray cuts and scrapes. You can use it for pink eye and swimmer's ear and strep throat. So it's got a lot of uses. I'm going to do another video in the future doing a deep dive on colloidal silver. But it's a really great thing. I even used it in my office as a hand sanitizer because the alcohol that was in hand sanitizers was really harsh on my skin. So I would just get a bottle of colloidal silver that was mixed with water, and I would spray my hands with that instead of the antibacterial gels or sprays that's on the market. I would even use it as a surface cleaner. I'd have some colloidal silver in a bottle, spray the surfaces, wipe them down. It'll kill any germs that might want to linger. So it's a really great multi-purpose product, and it's great for preventing strep throat. Now, there are some other things too that will also help with soothing the sore throat. And these recommendations could be whether it's from allergies or virus or strep, just to help you feel better when you have a sore throat. And of course, like in a previous video, I gave a recipe for a homemade herbal cough syrup. Today, I'm going to give you another recipe for a homemade herbal-based syrup that can be used to soothe the sore throat. And you're going to start with a cup of honey if your child's over 2. If your child is under 2 years of age or you don't want to use honey, agave syrup is a very good, safe substitute for honey. So you take your honey or your agave syrup, and if you're over 2, the honey is better because honey has its own antimicrobial properties. You put it on the stove, put it on low to medium heat. You just want to warm it up. And then you're going to add the herbs that are really good for soothing and treating sore throat. And one of those herbs is chamomile. Chamomile is a great anti-inflammatory. Another herb is peppermint, which is also another great anti-inflammatory. So the two of those herbs will help decrease the inflammation that's causing your throat to hurt. And then another really important ingredient is licorice root. Licorice root is a phenomenal antibacterial herb, and it's actually particularly good at killing strep bacteria. There was even a research study, and I'm going to post the information about that below, where it was in a Swedish medical journal. The research study, it was published in 2019, and they actually compared licorice root to a bunch of other herbs, and they found that a tincture of the licorice root actually killed a much higher count of the strep bacteria than the other herbs that they compared it to. So it's nice when these natural remedies actually have good research, a good research study behind them. And so you'll want to check that out. So 1 tablespoon of the licorice root, because that's the really powerful herb, and then the chamomile at 1 teaspoon, 1 teaspoon of the peppermint. Those 2 will help with the inflammation, but also help it to taste a little bit better, although I kind of like the taste of licorice. I know some people don't. You steep that, heat it up, let it heat for a while, strain out the herbal components, put it in a bottle, and when you or your child has a sore throat, it's a really great remedy to reach for. Now, another great remedy for sore throat is garlic. The problem is you don't want to add garlic to your honey-based syrup because it would taste horrible. And I think there's a better way to use the garlic to soothe the sore throat. And that is to just take some chicken broth or vegetable broth, heat it up on the stove, and add a lot of crushed garlic to it. Now, of course, the more the better. I know sometimes too much garlic may not taste that good. It might be harder to get your child to drink it. So, use as much garlic as you think you can get away with. Now, of course, in our house, there's no such thing as too much garlic. But, you want to keep that in mind because you can have the best remedy in the world. It's not going to do you any good if you can't get your child to take it. But between giving them the syrup and heating up some chicken broth or vegetable broth with the garlic in it, and you've got a really great combo for soothing that sore throat and helping prevent or trying to mitigate the strep throat. So now, you could also, if you really suspect that you're dealing with strep throat and you're waiting a day or 2 for the strep test, what would be even more powerful is instead of doing the syrup, just taking, a good amount of echinacea, maybe a tablespoon, an equal amount of the licorice root, and making a tea with those 2 combined. You can still add a little honey to the tea. And sipping that echinacea licorice root tea while also using the colloidal silver spray and the chicken broth with a lot of garlic in it, and you've got a really good chance of feeling better sooner, which is really the important point. So that's going to be your super treat sore throat, make you feel better from a sore throat, and maybe prevent the strep throat from setting in. The garlic chicken broth or vegetable broth if you're a vegetarian, the echinacea licorice root tea, and the colloidal silver spray. And the syrup is a good sore throat remedy for any other type of sore throat that you might have. So you can also, as always, you can email me or text me if you want more information, if you want to set up a consult. If you want to send me any comments through Facebook, I always appreciate that, especially any ideas that you might have for future videos, any topics that you might want me to cover, or any questions that you want me to delve in more deeply. Now, I do have some very exciting news. My website is finally up and running, so if you want to check that out, the website is wildchildwellness.org. How about that? I don't even know my own website yet. It's kind of like if you ask me what my own phone number is. So wildchildwellness.org. And on that website, you can schedule an appointment for a consult, and you can get more information about all of the services that I offer as a consultant, anything from parenting issues, behavioral issues, or if you want some more information on natural remedies or homeopathy. I hope you all have a great week. And remember, it's a beautiful day out there, no matter what kind of day it is. So get out there and enjoy it. And I'll see you all next week.